Today, we're going to break down a real cornerstone of instructional design, the ADDIE model. And if you're a healthcare professional who's been tasked with creating training for your teams, well, this framework is absolutely for you.
So let's just dive right into a core challenge that I bet a lot of you face. How in the world do you get nurses, physicians, pharmacists, and therapists all on the same page? It's really about creating training that makes sure everyone learns and works together effectively, because that's what leads to better patient outcomes. To answer that big question, we're going to walk through each of the 5 phases of the ADDIE model step by step. Think of it as our roadmap for creating training that actually sticks, changes behavior, and improves performance where it counts. Okay, first things first, let's build our foundation. What exactly is ADDIE? And why has it become the go-to framework for instructional design, especially in a field as complex and high-stakes as healthcare? At its heart, ADDIE is a systematic process. You can think of it as a really reliable guide that takes you all the way from identifying some kind of performance gap to creating and then evaluating a super targeted training solution. So what you're seeing here is the high-level map for our entire journey. You can see how each phase, analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate, just flows logically, one right into the next. It's truly a blueprint for building a solid, cohesive program from the ground up. All right, let's dive into the first and, arguably the most crucial phase, analyze. Seriously, if you get this part wrong, everything that follows is basically built on a shaky foundation. This is where we figure out the why behind the training. Before you write a single objective, you have to know your audience. I mean, are you training new grad nurses who really need those foundational skills? Are you training experienced physicians who are adopting new technology? Maybe it's for respiratory therapists learning a new protocol. Creating these distinct learner personas is absolutely the critical first step. Next, you've got to pinpoint the specific problem. It's just not enough to say, hey, we need training on central lines. You have to dig deeper and ask why. Is there a rising rate of central line-associated bloodstream infections that are directly impacting patient safety? Is compliance with the insertion checklist starting to drop? You've got to clearly define that gap between where performance is right now and where you need it to be. And this is so important, especially in healthcare. You have to ask how this problem touches the entire team. A central line isn't just a nursing task, right? It involves physician orders, it involves pharmacy protocols, and even sterile processing. Your analysis has to take all of these roles, their different workflows, and even their unique communication styles into account. So to really nail this phase, you need solid, concrete answers to these key questions. What's the real purpose here? What's the specific change in performance you absolutely need to see? Who exactly is your audience? And what are the gaps between what they can do now versus what they need to do? And of course, you've got to consider practical things like workflow differences and constraints like budget and time. Getting these things locked down ensures your training is laser-focused and built to solve a real-world problem. Okay, so once you've thoroughly analyzed the problem, you move into the design phase. This is where we shift from the what and why to answering that big question, how is the learning actually going to happen? This right here gets to the absolute heart of the design phase. See, it's not about just dumping a bunch of content on people and hoping for the best. It's about intentionally sequencing the experience. You start with clear goals, you connect the new stuff to what they already know, you introduce new information, then you give them a chance to practice, help them pull it all together, and finally make sure they can take that knowledge and use it at the patient's bedside. Great instructional design isn't about just picking activities at random because they seem cool. It's about grounding your strategy in solid learning theory. So, for instance, if you're teaching a really complex procedure, you might lean on strategies from cognitivism, which is all about how the brain processes information, by, say, chunking content to avoid overload. But if you're teaching clinical decision-making, you'll probably lean into constructivism, the idea that we learn by doing, and use things like simulations and case studies. All right, now we move to the develop phase. This is where the blueprint you've made becomes a reality. It's where we create the tangible materials that your learners are actually going to see, touch, and interact with. This is where the magic happens, for real. Your storyboards and your design documents, they come to life. You're creating those video demos, building out the simulations, writing the case studies, and finalizing those all-important checklists. And this is the perfect time to create a prototype and pilot test it with a small group of learners. It lets you catch any issues before you do a full rollout. Now, just look at how a simple tool like this rubric provides essential quality control. For something like a central line simulation, this gives you clear, objective criteria. It moves assessment away from a subjective, yeah, that looks pretty good, to a measurable, consistent standard that you can actually track over time. So next, we deliver the training in the implement phase. But our work is not done, not by a long shot. In fact, this is where we enter that continuous loop of evaluation and improvement that really shows you the true power of this model. This is probably the most crucial piece of advice for anyone using this model. The real power of ADDIE isn't in following a perfectly straight line from A to E. No, it's in its flexibility, its ability to circle back and refine the whole process as you go. So here's the key takeaway. See evaluation not as the final step, but as an ongoing process. Feedback you get from a pilot test during development, that might send you right back to the design phase. Data from implementation, that could force you to revisit your initial analysis. It's this constant feedback loop that makes ADDIE so robust and so adaptable, especially in a world like healthcare where protocols and best practices are always changing. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative question to chew on. When you look at your own training materials, can you clearly see the structured thinking of ADDIE at work? Is your design intentional? Is it aligned? And is it built to solve that specific problem you identified way back at the very beginning? Answering yes to those questions, well, that's the mark of truly effective instructional design.